Welcome everybody to the Ask the Experts webinar for this snowy, icy, and maybe even rainy day in Southern Ontario. Tuesday, February the 12th, 1 week till the last stop bill day. It's hard to believe it's coming up so fast. As noted in the various social media outlets, today our Ask the Experts webinar has two special guests, Mark Breadner, President of First Canada, and Kim Cooper, Vice President of Partnerships. Now, as we do every week, we're going to record this. We are recording this right now, and at the end of the evening, we'll post the recording to the First Canada YouTube channel and send out the link to everybody who's on the webinar, who's been on the webinar, Ask the Experts webinar over the course of this year so far, and we'll also post the link on First Canada's Facebook page. Along the way, if you have any questions, we've had some questions sent in to us by various people, but if you do have any questions along the way, please put them in the chat box. We actually have a question. It's not really a question, but we are joined once again by one of our FSMs out west, and that is Craig Maynard from Alberta. And we also have with us today our newest first senior mentor, Phil Homerski, who has joined us in the past week, and he has replaced George Chisholm. As most of you know, George had some health problems in the fall and has decided to resign his post as FSM, and we're very, very lucky to have Phil with us, not to replace George because he's irreplaceable, but to add to the first senior mentors that we already have. So we welcome Phil on board with us. And maybe we'll hear from him later on if he has a question for Mark or Kim. So without much further preamble by me, we're going to get started. So maybe they'll tell us more about themselves, but just in case you don't know, in case you've never heard of Mark Breadner or Kim Cooper, here's a little bit about both of them. Mark is the president of First Canada. He was the very first coach of the original first robotics competition team in Canada, Team 188 out of Woburn. He is a Woody Flowers winner, so the people that have been Woody Flowers finalists in Canada, they compete for the Woody Flowers trophy at the award at the World Championships, and Mark is a winner of that. He's the only Canadian that I know of. He can correct me if I'm wrong with my history. And Kim Cooper is the Vice President of Partnerships, amongst the things that she does. And if you haven't seen Kim, she's the smallest person in that. Oh, I don't know. You're sort of leaning in. You might actually be taller than John Hobbins. I'm not really sure, Kim, but Kim has the longest hair in this picture. And if I look at it, the only one without gray hair there, Kim. Mm-hmm. And Kim comes to First Canada. Her last job was with, I think, was with Owl Magazine. So most of us grew up with Owl Magazine, and people my age got it for their kids and for their grandkids. So maybe we'll hear a little bit about that too. So we're going to kick it off anyways. I know Mark has a few stories, and anybody can jump in with questions as we go along, but we have a few to get us started off. And a couple of things, Mark, maybe you can explain, because sometimes we all just assume that everybody knows the story of First in Canada, but maybe you can explain a little bit more in detail about that.
Sure. Be glad to. So, yeah, First in Canada has an interesting history. Certainly, it's grown so big now. But back in the very early days, as a matter of fact, the very first day, First was not very big. It was just a handful of U.S. teams. And as we all know, Dean Kamen started it, and Woody Flowers was on board at MIT. And so I was a very green teacher at Woburn Collegiate, just looking for something fun for kids to do. and extracurricular, something outside the classroom. And it was funny because at that point, First's 1-800 number didn't work outside the U.S. and I couldn't get a long-distance phone call out of the school to phone First headquarters in Manchester, but I somehow found a way. No one had cell phones back then. Anyway, I found a way to get a hold of First in New Hampshire, and just said, hey, if could we have a Canadian team? Could we come to your event? I had no idea what we were getting into, and they said yes. If you raise the money, you can do it. So I like challenges, so we decided we were going to build this robot. We had to drive to New Hampshire to get our kit of parts. There were no remote kickoffs at that time. So we drove there in the middle of a huge ice storm, worse than the ice storm we're getting right now. We probably shouldn't have gone. Probably the school board wouldn't have let us go if they knew we were actually going. Anyway, drove to New Hampshire, got the kit of parts, came back here, built our robot, and at that time there were no regionals, no districts, no nothing. There was just one event. They called it the National Championship at that time. And it was in Florida, actually at Epcot Center, which was pretty cool. So we went to that the very first year, and I was just blown away by what we know First is and what it's all about. And we kept doing it for a few years. Woburn did, and then I said we gotta get some more teams from Canada. So I worked on getting some more teams like Crescent and some more TDSB teams, and that kept growing. And then I asked another question to First. I said, how do we have an event in Canada? Why do we have to always go to the U.S. to compete? And they said, well, if you raise $250,000, you can have your own event in Canada. So I enlisted some help from our board of directors, and we raised the money. And in 2002, we had our first event called the Canadian Regional, and we kind of have never looked back since. So and then we just started to grow and started to get some awesome teams and mentors involved, and we attracted the attention of some sponsors and of the government and many parents, and it just started to kind of snowball and grow to the point that we actually, I couldn't run First Canada and be a teacher or principal at the same time, so that's when I took a leave to run the organization. And I've been very lucky since that time to have attracted some amazing people to help run this organization, and do all the work that we do. And I couldn't be happier with the staff that I have that work for First Canada and all that we do. So anyway, that kept growing, and then as we got bigger and we're one of the larger areas of First outside the U.S., they started asking me nicely about going to the district model because it was more plays for teams, and it also meant most of the organizational work was done locally, and First headquarters wasn't doing that, and they wanted us to go district, but I was patient with it to try to make sure we had all the pieces in place to move to the district model. So that was a few years in the planning. But again, with the help of a lot of people, we moved to the district model. I think it's been fairly well received. I know for teams, they get 2 plays basically for the price of 1. You get to play much more. We have our own championship. So I think the feedback that I've got from people out there is that it was well received. It was a lot of work on our part to now, instead of just waiting for the first truck to arrive with everything on it for a regional event. Not that it was that easy, but a lot easier than districts. We now plan everything in terms of getting the equipment to the events, making sure it's all set up properly. There's very little help from headquarters. It's more decentralized and more on us. And again, we have a great team to do that now. So, it's been going really well. There's always new stuff going on. A lot of things we're doing in EDI. Kim will speak to that probably more than I. Some great things with girls in STEM and other communities we're working with. As far as the future of First Canada, I just see it continuing to grow. getting more and more teams across Canada, more and more people involved from a volunteer perspective. Hopefully getting every province to have, a first organization that is running large-scale events in their province. We've been pretty successful at moving outside the walls of Ontario. There's a good organization in Alberta. There's a good organization in BC now. There's a good organization in Quebec. And we enjoy working with those organizations. But we still got a lot more that we can grow, a lot more we can do, a lot more kids that can be affected. So in a sense, our work is never done at First Canada. There's always more. There's always more people to get involved, more volunteers to get involved, more sponsors. But I'm really happy with the progress that we've made to date.
That's great. Now, in case people don't know, there are teams in Quebec, obviously Ontario. Manitoba has its first FRC team, and they're competing in an event, a regional in North Dakota. They were recently profiled by the CBC out in Winnipeg. We have teams in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC. So we're hitting a lot of the provinces, and who knows, we may have some in other provinces in the coming year. Is there anything that is new this year?
Not that we can announce at this point, but there may be some announcements at the provincial championship that people will want to be listening for. But other than, of course, a new event at Humber this year, we have a new event at Humber, which is exciting, which will be the first ever. But there may be some program announcements coming up at our provincial championships. But not to mention all the other things we're doing in EDI and all the other events that we're running and involved with. Yeah, I would be listening at provincials to see if there's anything new with regard to a program or programs being offered.
So that's like a teaser then.
A little bit of a teaser, yeah.
But no video. We'll have to work on that one. And now we'll get to Kim. Kim, your story about getting involved in First is as interesting as Mark's. What happened there?
Well, at my former job, I was the editor of Owl Magazine for Kids, and I was working on an article about cool jobs. And so I actually ended up interviewing Sean Lim, and he from 610 at the time, and so he actually introduced me to the whole world of First. And after we published the article, and I had interviewed Sean as a roboticist, sort of an engineer, and so after we published the article, we polled all of the readers, and they liked that job the best out of all the jobs that we had profiled. So I thought, you know what, I want to get more involved in this STEM world, this world of STEM. And so I was on the First website, and I saw that there was a First executive advisory board. So I contacted Mark Breadner. I didn't know who he was or anything like that, but I knew they only had one woman on the executive advisory board. So I thought, well, I would love to be a part of this. And so I contacted Mark, and then I kept contacting him until him and Kevin Marai, who's the chair of the executive advisory board, they said, sure, we would love to have you a part of the board. So as I was working at OWL, I was contributing as a volunteer for First, and getting to know a lot of the sponsors who are also, a lot of them are members of the advisory board. And eventually Mark convinced me that I should go to First full time, and that's how I ended up here. And I was really happy about the change, because I was ready for a change from print publishing, and I wanted to reinvent myself with technology and STEM, and still work with kids and youth. So it's been a great experience. And as far as what exactly is my job, Paul Keenan always. Pardon?
Go ahead. I was just going to point that part out. Finish what you're going to say.
Paul Keenan is constantly asking me, what exactly is your job? And so I work with our sponsors and our partners, and primarily responsible for bringing in a new sponsorship and working with our current and existing sponsors to engage their employees in our initiatives and get them out to events and just generally get them more involved and excited about the program, and also make new collaborations so that our sponsors can benefit our teams and our students, and then of course learn from our students and our programs. So that is probably the best part of my job, is when those collaborations happen, where I can see that, you know, some of these major corporations, they're learning from these amazing and talented students in all of our programs, and they're seeing how, you know, the gracious professionalism and the core values that we teach in the program, they're learning from that. And then of course, you know, it's wonderful when we have these sponsors like Microsoft, when they really want to support some of these teams, particularly those teams in need who maybe wouldn't have the support of bigger companies like that. So I love bringing those people together and seeing what can happen, and then seeing how the teams can grow from those benefits and those sponsors, and going from there.
So part of that, Kim, was exactly as your job was that we kept bumping into each other at Ryerson, and neither of us knew what each other was doing. And because when the first senior mentor program started in 2014, we had no idea what we were doing because there were none in Canada. So we were sort of trying to make it up as we went along. So that we just, I don't know what your job is, because I don't even know what my job is, but we sort of figured it out. And one of the things I would say about that, both about what Kim does and what we do as a first senior mentor, and Mark and John and the rest of the first staff, is you have to, if you're a team out there and you're thinking, you know, we want to be more involved, you need to tell us your story. You need to let us know who you are. Like, for example, we have a golf tournament that we want to have teams involved with, and then we get to know you. Kim has helped a lot of teams that we only needed help because they were talking to us and they were emailing us with questions and responding to emails I was sending out. So please take the time to I know everybody's busy, but see us at events and come to the swag booth and get picked on and mocked and stuff like that, and let us know about your team and your kids and what you're trying to do and how we can help. So, Kim, you are involved with the entire country of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work for you?
Well, luckily, a lot of the last few years, we've had some sponsors that have got involved nationally, like Microsoft and RBC. They sponsor teams across Canada, so I get to work with the folks in each of those regions to distribute those funds, and then hear the stories that they have that we can share with the group and our sponsors. And then this past year, we were able to get some CanCode funding where we could bring extra coding curriculum into some schools and communities. So it's been wonderful getting to know the regions even more through that program. So, for example, I wasn't very familiar with the first Lego League program at Acadia University in Halifax, and now because of Can Code, I've got to know the amazing stuff that they're doing and perhaps how we can collaborate in the future. So these programs are really bringing us together across the country.
Well, that's great. Now, we have some questions from other people that sent them in, but those people that are listening, if you do have a question you want to get answered, please interrupt anytime, put it in the chat, and we'll take those questions as we go along. So the first one is for Mark and then Kim. What is one thing that the first community in Canada would be surprised to learn about you, Mark?
Oh boy. Let's see. Well, I mean, it's not too exciting, but probably that I'm a big outdoors person, and I really like fishing. It's one of my favorite pastimes, and slalom water skiing is something that I really enjoy doing too. So maybe people wouldn't know that about me, but that's what my favorite things to do are in the summer.
Kim?
Well, I actually studied Japanese in university, so I have a Bachelor of Arts degree in Pacific and Asian Studies. So I learned how to speak Japanese for quite a few years, and I lived in Japan for a while. So I don't practice at all now, and I won't be speaking any Japanese on this webinar.
Oh.
However, it's what I studied in school, so sometimes people are surprised to hear about that.
We have someone has chimed in with a question about bees. Mark, something about Mark and bees.
Oh, well, that could be another surprising thing, I guess. Last year I decided I would take up the hobby of being a beekeeper. So at my cottage in the summer, I have a beehive, which is fascinating. If you ever want to find something interesting about a fantastic insect, look up bees, because they are incredibly intelligent animals. But anyway, that was started because I like blueberries and I like picking wild blueberries, and I didn't think there were enough bees at the cottage to pollinate them. So that caused me to look into having a beehive. So yeah, so I do a bit of that on the side. It's quite fun, actually. And I've only got stung 3 times, which is pretty good.
I was going to ask that. So how many bees do you have?
Well, that's that could be a long answer, but probably right now I hope I have about 5,000 to 10,000. I hope they're surviving the winter up there, and then they build up again in the spring, and probably about 30,000. And I'm going to triple the number of hives I have this year. I'm going to go from 1 to 3, hopefully.
You know, when I was a beginning teacher at Teachers College in Ottawa, I actually worked at a beekeeping thing, an outdoor education place.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. I didn't get stung though, but or get any of the honey. Just saying. So one question that we have from people is, how big of a staff does First Canada have?
Do you want to take that, Kim, or you want me to take it?
No, mine's the next question, so you go ahead. You take that.
Okay. We have a variety of different. We're very fortunate to have, I think it's 5 senior mentors in Ontario, and then there's also senior mentors in Alberta and BC. So we have 5 senior mentors that actually kind of work with First Canada, but are kind of not given their marching orders, but report in through the United States as well through headquarters. And as you know, Paul is a first senior mentor, and Annika Pint is a first senior mentor, and Phil Homerski is a first senior mentor, Melissa Douglas, and Heather Kelso, and Sherilyn Koshelski. And these people have become absolutely a huge part of our fabric, and what they do to help teams and mentor rookie teams and be at events and help with so many different things. So that's great. And then I believe we have 9 full-time / part-time staff that take care of so many things, individual programs, for instance, First Lego League or First Lego League Junior, or FRC, and we have a finance manager, we have a warehouse manager, we have a digital brand and a coordinator. So we've been able to grow the staff nicely on a yearly basis as we're able to attract more sponsors and our program gets bigger and bigger. We're always on the lookout for people that fit in well when we have the opportunity. So I've been very fortunate to hire just the perfect people to help make us able to do what we do.
That's great. Thank you. And Kim, we had you and I and Artie and Vivashan and Josh had a tremendous adventure last year with the Afghan Girls. And we had a question from Team 4039 in Hamilton. They wanted to know what's happening with the girls now.
Well, I love that question, and I thought I better reach out to Roya and ask her because I wanted the facts all correct. So I did hear back from her, and she said that the girls are planning to go to Turkey to compete in FRC again. So originally they were maybe going to go to Texas this season, but now their plan is to go to Turkey. So hopefully that will all work out for them. And then, as most of you know, they are on a mission to start a school of STEM and STEAM, in Afghanistan and in other places. So they've actually been able to establish some partnerships, and one with Yale University, who's designing the campus, and then they've got other partners like the World AI Summit and Robotex. So she's super excited about this, and she says that the school will open in 2021. Wow. And apparently they're building 5 of them. So that's a huge accomplishment that they're going to do. And then Roya, who's basically the lead and the CEO of Digital Citizen Fund, she was just accepted into a presidential leadership scholar program, and it basically teaches the students about the past American president leadership, and based under the 4 leaderships of presidents. So, and then she was also accepted into an executive program at Stanford. So needless to say, the group is doing really well, and she wanted to pass on, she wanted to say hello to everyone here, and again, thanks to everyone for all their support while they were here.
Wow, that's great. We do have a question. I guess this is mainly for you, Mark, since you deal with it more. From Abby, she wants to know, how do you feel about the no bag day for 2020?
Well, it's going to happen. Let's put it that way. It's been decided by HQ that it's going to happen. I have to admit, probably. Personally, for me, I would have voted to keep it the way it is, but I certainly understand the benefits to it for teams, and we're certainly obviously going to adhere to the new rule up here in Ontario and in Canada. My concern is, we all do this to get more students excited about doing something for their future career. Whether that be STEM or not STEM, and there's so much more to learn when you do first, and it's much more than the robot, and you all know that. It's so much more about character building and teamwork and leadership skills. So to that end, we expand our teams, thankfully, by mentors, both corporate and teachers, that stick up their hand and say, I'm going to do something amazing for kids. I'm going to volunteer to mentor this team. So, I'm always concerned about mentors and making sure they're having a good time and they're not burning out. There is a side of this where I think mentors will need to plan the new time frame with the students ahead of time, and I think it's totally doable. such that it doesn't, there isn't too much more extra work and extra time. We all know the job fills to expand the time, no matter what you do. But I think there's some really cool things you can do with the no bagging anymore. For instance, for everybody, if exam week falls in the middle of build season, and it's very important that the students do well in their exams so they can get into the universities and colleges and trades or whatever they'd like to get into. One creative thing to do would be to actually, shut it down during that week, let the kids study like they need to, and then do an extra week on the end before your first event. I think it really will be important for teams to sit down, this spring or next fall and say, okay, there is no bagging anymore. Do we want to work on it the full 8-9 weeks, or do we want to schedule some time off? And I think every team will approach it differently, and every team it will work in different ways for. But I think it can work very well for all teams as long as there's some forethought given to how to do it. Clearly, for teams that have been building 2 robots in the past so they can practice, which a number of teams do across Canada, it's going to save them some money because they don't need to build that second robot. If they don't want to, they can use their robot for the whole time. So that's a benefit to teams in terms of saving money. So I think overall, it's interesting. It's different. And I think as long as teams discuss it as a group before the season starts, I think it can be very positive for all the teams.
That's interesting. We have an interesting comment from Peter from one of our rookie teams this year. There's 23 rookie teams in Ontario, and he's from the Six Nations team in Brantford, and I believe he was originally a teacher, or maybe still is technically, in the Toronto District School Board. He says, too bad that the no bag rule isn't this year. We could have done more, particularly with now our 5th snow day, family day exams, all during build season. And his interesting comment to me, and I never thought of this, but it's true, is it would also allow us to introduce and integrate robotics within the curriculum, certainly in the beginning of the second semester, end of the first, beginning of the second. So that's interesting. If your team is making software for scouting, once you've known the game, then you have a little bit more time to do that too, if you've got computer science at your school. So that's interesting.
Yeah, no, those are good comments. And first 1 year I think did make an allowance for, it was a really bad year and weather-wise, and they did. And I think just for consistency now they've, it's unfortunate. I know some teams have lost some days, especially recently. But for the most part, the teams you're competing against, at least in Ontario, are probably experiencing the same kind of problems. But I know that's little comfort when you're in your last few days of trying to get your robot finished. But I know First has now a policy that I think basically under no circumstances will they extend the build season. Of course, next year that's going to be all fixed, if you will. There won't be any end to the build season.
So Kim, this was a question from a team earlier this week. Is emailing or calling for sponsorships, potential sponsorships, better than visiting local shops for sponsors in person? And I would assume that they mean cold calling.
I think that it depends on the situation, but I think if they're trying to email a sponsor, I think a very key thing for that is to have a engaging subject line, but also don't send out a blanket email to a bunch of sponsors. Make sure that you research who you're sending that email to, so that it is personalized. I know I do hear from some sponsors that sometimes there's not a name. It doesn't even say dear so-and-so. It's just, hi, I'm looking for sponsorship for my team. So there's no connection there, and it's really, I believe you can build a connection by email. Sometimes it's difficult to get that attention, but I mean, if you do take the time to research these people and email them, and then maybe follow up with a phone call, that can be effective. And then if you are from a smaller town or or even the bigger places. Like sometimes the local shops, they will sponsor you, and it's awesome that you go face to face and with a few members of your team, to wearing your team shirts and stuff, so that they can get to know you, and really the key is to get them excited about your team, want them to know more. Same with emailing. I mean, you want them to be intrigued enough that that they'll maybe come out to one of an off-season event or one of the events to see you. So I think both can work depending on the situation.
I know we're running, we've run past our time, but if you're okay with taking a few more questions, Mark and Kim.
Paul, can I just throw in a couple things there too on that?
Sure.
I mean, just relating some experiences just to help teams. There was a young man from Team 5406 that decided he was going to get in contact with the president of IBM Canada, and this was a couple of years ago, and emailed him with a good subject line, and the president of IBM Canada read this young man's email. Now, it helped that he was from Hamilton as well, and actually came out to one of our events, sponsored the team. A huge relationship developed there for that team with IBM, and it's kind of spilled over. We get some support from IBM too now as well. So, there's a good example of it just being persistent but having a good subject line, like Kim said. Back in the early days, and one other story, back in the early days, for teams that are larger and have lots of students, very often you have parents that really want to help, but maybe they're not handy and maybe they can't be there for build season. You'd be amazed at the connections you can get through parents on your team that may have contacts with sponsors or companies that will give money towards such a great thing like FIRST. So I actually, after a couple of years, developed a parent council on my FIRST team. They brought food, which was great when we worked late, which was fantastic. And they also said, you know what, we're going to phone some people and we're going to try to raise some money for the team. And they did. And they were really happy to do it because it made them feel really included on the team. And they were very thankful for what FIRST was doing for their kids. So, that's something to think about, getting your parents, some of the parents of the kids involved with things like that. It's something they can do, on their own time. And it can really help. It can really pay off.
Yeah, it's interesting about that. As teams get older, they seem to be heading that way. I know a team that's close to where I live, 43 in Aurora, has got significantly more parents over the last couple of years, and that's exactly what's taking place. But Mark, you've prompted us another question from Erin. She wants to know what makes a good subject line. So she wants to get into the details here.
Now, I don't know what his subject line was. I'm going to... I think Kim might have a better answer for that. I mean, something that attracts their attention. I don't know, Kim. Do you have some ideas? You're far better at that kind of thing than myself.
Well, I think it takes a bit of time to research, but if you can research what the company has recently done, or if there was a press release or something that came out about an innovation that they may be announcing, if you could somehow brilliantly kind of link something about that research into what you were doing and blend it into a subject line, then again, like, it can be kind of tricky, but I personally love challenges like that where you have to, in a very short amount of words, put together an impactful subject line. And also sometimes it's, I mean, not all the time, but sometimes it's, special message for whoever it is, and then semicolon, and then, a special invite, like almost like a special invited guest kind of thing. Special invited guest invite to whatever event, because that makes people feel really good. And maybe you time it to one of your off seasons, or maybe it's just, you're inviting that sponsor to come out to your school, or just to visit your team or something like that. So that's also something you could think about for the subject line, is treating it as a special invited guest for an event.
But I think part of what you said earlier, Kim, is part of the key to being able to do that is doing the research. One of the things that I know I recommended when I was still teaching a long time ago was that students should join LinkedIn. And you'd be surprised how many contacts you may know of that are in a company like IBM or Microsoft or some local company to you that work there. And a lot of companies, or some companies anyways, in Ontario, will sponsor if there's a person on there, an employee that gets involved with a team or support that team in some way. So you never know the relationships you might already have, either that you know of or other parents or other students. They don't have to be direct parents. They could be relatives. So you just don't know until you do the research, but that's key.
Paul, I'll just throw in too that, sometimes you have to be patient too. So the best sales day of the year for you, team, maybe, your big celebration at the end of build day, at the end of your school, the build period, which I hope you all do. I hope you all take time to celebrate when you put that robot in the bag and celebrate all the good work you've done. So if you have a celebration there, that might be good to invite someone to, but invite them to the events you're going to. I like to think the first events in Ontario and across Canada are super exciting and super high energy, and it might be that you don't get money from them the first year, but they come out and see the event, and then they say, wow, I want to be part of this. I want to support you in that. And the second thing is, don't ever be afraid to call hi. In other words, to email the president of a company. Don't ever be afraid to do that. You'd be amazed. Some of these people are so super interested. And if your email has a catchy tagline, like you're just talking about, or a subject line, but if it also relates to the vision that they have or the philanthropic things that their company is into, for instance, girls in STEM or promoting the trades or whatever, you can find that on their website, what they're really into. If you relate directly to that, that's going to help your case hugely.
So we're going to skip ahead to a couple of questions because, like I say, we have gone over time. But Kim, this was a big one, I think, for all of us in FIRST, and you're the leader in this for us. When will the Girls in STEM conference be held this year, and when will the applications come out?
Well, we're actually still waiting on one of the sponsors for this event, but I did finish the flyer this week, so we do know that it is June, just a minute, Saturday, June 8th and 9th, and we will be, we're actually accepting applicants now, so people can reach out to me if you're interested in going, and then we'll also be putting the word out through the FSMs. I know Sherry Lynn in the Windsor region, she started to get the word out there, and in general we accept about 2 girls per team. Some of the teams from far away, like Manitoulin Island and such, we accept a few more girls, but bottom line is January 8th and 9th, and we'll be putting that in the newsletter next week for the FRC teams.
Okay, thank you, Kim. So I'm just going to check the last page I had, I think, here to see if there was another one. Oh, yeah, I wanted to, that first one there, Mark. I keep getting asked that question wherever I go. Will Canada ever host the World Champs?
Well, I will tell you, I've been asked about it by FIRST headquarters, not if we would do it if we had a venue for it. And believe it or not, we don't really have a venue that's big enough to host it. If you think of World Championships and it all being under one roof, FRC, FTC, FL, FL Junior, and all the pit areas, you'd say, oh, the Sky Dome in Toronto or Rogers Centre. Well, that could be good for the final, the finals, and Einstein and all that kind of stuff. But then where would all the pits go? They'd have to go to the Metrotron Convention Center, which is a heck of a walk, to get to the Sky Dome. So, I would love it to be up here. That would be like a 5-year project, and obviously you have to have the federal and provincial government involved. But we don't have an ideal venue for it that has all that massive amount of space together. Not to mention, we're about 7% of FIRST worldwide, which is the biggest chunk other than the U.S. itself. But it would be a bit of a tough sell to the FIRST worldwide board of directors to convince them to come to Canada when we're only 7% of the population. It's not impossible, just like it wasn't impossible to ever have the first team go or have a first event up here in Canada. But we have some issues to deal with in terms of actually having a space big enough for it.
Okay, and Kim, I'm going to get you to do the last question since you were there in Detroit. How was the Governor General received by the teams, the Canadians, and the Americans, and the mentors in Detroit?
Well, I think everybody was so excited that she was there, and she had done a keynote speech in one of the events the night before. It was Dean came in, and people were just in awe of what she said and an inspiring message she said. I think our only regret was that she didn't have more time to spend with everybody at the event, but we were so happy that we got the group picture of her there, and she even watched a few matches and again took some pictures with some students there. So I think everybody was really, really excited that she was there, and I know that some of the first U.S. headquarters, they spoke a lot after, saying how amazing a role model she is. So I think it went really well anyway.
Well, I know that at the World Championships, I'm in registration and I'm kind of there and I don't move around a lot. And I kept having people coming up to me and telling me that they were so impressed with her. They just couldn't believe. They wanted to keep her. They wanted to keep her in the States for their own. But fortunately, we got her back across the border. But yeah, it was pretty amazing. Hear all the stories that people were telling and how impressed they were. But again, we've run out of time. So I want to thank you.
Paul, could I pipe in one quick thing?
Oh, Craig Maynard from Alberta. Go right ahead.
I speak.
Yes.
I just wanted to say one thing to you, Mark. I want to thank you very much for your years and years of dedicated devotion to FIRST robotics. I met you back in 2003 when we ran our first high school team in the Mission Mars event. You came to Calgary and supported us, got us kicked off. That was the same year that I did the FLL tournament for, actually it was Stack Attack for FRC. Yep. And you got me so whipped up. We did the first Lego League tournament, Mission Mars, way back then too, and it's been running in Alberta ever since. So your enthusiasm has been infectious, and it's affected us right across this whole country. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Craig, and thank you for I remember that back in 2003, and for you getting so excited about FIRST and continuing on the dream out there and keeping the program going out there. And that's very much appreciated, and I know your heart and soul is behind FIRST and getting as many kids involved as possible, and you've stuck with the program right from the very beginning, so that's very much appreciated.
Yeah, I'm a lifer. Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
Well, since Craig chimed in and he's from Calgary, I'm going to tell a Calgary story then. So in 2013, my team went out to Calgary for the first event, the 2013 event that was being held at the Olympic Oval, the speed skating rink. And we went out, and a couple of other Ontario teams went out, and we had just been around for a year with that team, and I didn't really know Mark that well. But he came out too, and I said, I have brothers out there. And the NHL strike had just finished. And so Mark said, do you think we could get tickets? And so we did. We got tickets, and it was going to be Calgary versus Edmonton. Big game, right, Craig? That's the
it is out here, yeah.
So we were going to go to the Saddle Dome. So we all met. We were staying at the university. We all come out. We're all coming out ready to go. And out comes Mark Breadner wearing a Leafs jersey. I said,
Oh.
we're going to. The Leafs are not playing. I think he knew that, but I just couldn't believe he was the only. I'm sure you were the only one in the stands that was wearing a Leaf sweater. So
That's probably true. Yeah.
if you didn't know that about Mark, he's a diehard Leafs fan. Maybe the biggest one I know, but that led to another question that we didn't ask, but we'll ask it now from Craig, from Blair Huntermark, who's the MC at many of the events, the world events, and he usually comes to Canada once or twice a year to start off a new event. And he wanted to know, Mark, where you were when the Leafs lost to the Boston Bruins in the Stanley Cup playoffs last year.
Yeah. Oh, dear. Well, we were all in Detroit, and I hosted everyone back in my hotel room after the FRC event, and hoping, of course, that the Toronto Maple Leafs would beat the Boston Bruins. And of course, Blair was there, and it did not happen. And he proceeded to litter my bedroom with Boston Bruin logos everywhere throughout the course of the evening. So, yeah, there's a bit of a rivalry there. But in all seriousness, I didn't mention it earlier, but we have a really good relationship with First Headquarters. And I know Don Bosey very well, and they are really supportive of what we do up in Canada and always willing to listen if we have a crazy idea, always willing to let us pilot new things. So, we really feel valued as a valued partner of First Worldwide, and they've been supportive of everything we've done, from the get-go up here. And there was a time where they were really more focused on the U.S. and sort of outside of the country teams. They're there, they can do it, but, they're just kind of out there. Now the board of directors, thanks to Don's leadership, and for the last number of years, is extremely U.S. and international focused. So, they listen. When John Hobbins has a great idea about how to maximize or optimize our shipping to get our robots to Detroit, as an example, to make sure every single one of the teams in Canada gets their robot there on time, they listen and they work with us. And to me, that's really, really important that we can pick up the phone anytime and get support from them. So, I truly value that, and I think it's a big bonus for us up here. And we, on the other side of the coin, is we try to be very good partners for them. And I really truly believe across Canada, it's not a competition in terms of who puts on the best events, but I really feel that our events are second to none. And certainly the feedback we get would say that. And certainly anyone, please come up and talk to us at events. And, if you have questions or suggestions, or, please reach out and let Kim or myself or John or Artie or Dave or Christine or Dawn or Jan or Florence, or any of our FSMs, let them know, because we're always trying to improve. We don't think we're doing it perfectly, but we're always trying to improve, and certainly always willing to listen.
So thanks again, Mark and Kim. It was great. And thanks to everybody that joined us tonight and everybody that provided questions before tonight. And again, if you have more questions for us, you can contact any of us through the email addresses that you probably already have from the emails you've already gotten to us. But if you don't have someone's email address and you want to get a hold of them, you can contact me, Pete Keenan at firstinspires.org, and I will make sure to get through to them. The one last thing I'd like to leave on is one thing the Americans love about us, Craig, and you'll remember this, is they love our swag. They love that First Canada caps and hoodies, and jackets and all that
Chip
kind of
clips.
stuff. Not so much the chip
clips.
clip. Not so much the chip clips. I was
Okay,
kind of
love the
hoping
chip
that wouldn't come up, but I think I might edit that out of the webinar. But thanks once again, everybody, and good night and good luck with the weather tomorrow wherever you are in the country.
Good night.
Thanks,
Good night,
Paul.
Paul.